Welcome to Heron Bay Amenities, y'all.
That's what the HOA president shouted while she handed pool keys to 14 strangers, streaming past my gate with coolers of hard seltzer. I stepped out of my truck with 2 grocery bags and watched a grown man cannonball off the bronze fountain in my own backyard. I'd built that fountain 6 months after my wife died of cancer. Linda didn't flinch. She pointed at my driveway and told the next SUV full of renters to park wherever's shady. That's the thing about people like her. Give them a little fake power and they start selling things that were never theirs to sell. What she didn't know was that I designed this community's gate system 9 years ago. Every access code in her hand still answered to my laptop, so I didn't argue. I set the bags down, reached for my phone, and started recording. Tell me below, would you have confronted her or let her keep selling something she didn't own? Before Linda Caldwell ever called my wife's memorial fountain an unauthorized decoration, Heron Bay Estates was the kind of place you moved to for a slow Florida life. 120 homes tucked behind a salt rust iron gate, stitched together by sable palms and crushed shell driveways. The air always smelled like coconut sunscreen, and a thunderstorm was always 20 minutes out. I moved in with Mary Ann in 2014. The realtor said the back lot had room for a saltwater pool. My wife loved water more than any person I've ever known. She wasn't supposed to die at 54. The oncologist called it pancreatic. I called it a thief. During chemo, she told me the pool was the only place she didn't feel the poison moving through her body. She said the water held her up when her own legs wouldn't. I sat on the travertine every morning at 6, watching her float, counting her breaths like somebody counts stars. After she was gone, I built the memorial fountain myself. Bronze sea turtle, cast in Sarasota by an old man who used to make hurricane lamps for shrimp boats. Her initials pressed into the shell, MBB. The fountain ran off the pool skimmer line. It hummed at night like something alive. For 2 years, it kept me company while I learned how to be alone in a house built for 2. My name is Evan Brooks. I'm 58, and before I retired, I spent 30 years designing access control systems, casinos, federal courthouses, one very paranoid children's hospital in Atlanta. If a building had a lock on it, somebody in my office probably wrote the firmware. When Heron Bay was built in 2015, the developer couldn't afford a commercial gate vendor. I installed the whole system as a favor to the community. 6 gates, 42 keypads, 1 admin account, mine. The HOA promised to migrate the system to their own contractor within 90 days. That was 9 years ago. They never did. Linda Caldwell took over as HOA president in 2018. Blonde bob sprayed into a helmet, rhinestone flip-flops in July, linen blazer over yoga pants in March. She drove a pearl Lexus SUV and carried a clipboard like it was a concealed weapon. Her southern drawl was manufactured in New Jersey. She called every woman sweetie and every man honey, and both words came with a little dagger hidden inside them. Her husband Gregory sat on the Sarasota County Planning Commission. She mentioned it in every third sentence. The first time I realized something was wrong was a Tuesday in May. I pulled into my driveway after visiting Mary Ann at the cemetery, and a Kia Telluride with Ohio plates was already parked in my spot. A woman in a one-piece was waving at her kids over my side fence. I could hear splashing, laughter, someone yelling about Marco Polo. I walked through my own gate and found 14 strangers in my pool. A toddler was relieving himself into the deep end. A man was trying to climb the memorial fountain with a can of twisted tea in his fist. And there, at the gate, stood Linda Caldwell, handing a laminated pass to a second family. "Evan, honey," she chirped, bright as a fluorescent light. "These are our amenity guests. Community pools for everyone who pays the fee." "Linda, this is my parcel. The pool's on my deed." She laughed. She actually laughed. She patted my shoulder like I was a slow child. "Oh, sweetie, the 1998 master plan covers all that. I know you miss Mary Ann, but hoarding amenities isn't grieving. It's just being difficult." She walked off in a cloud of drugstore perfume. I stood in my own backyard, listening to a stranger drop something plastic into the fountain. For the first time since the funeral, my hands went completely still. Not angry, focused. The certified letter I mailed Linda Caldwell on Thursday morning was 4 pages long, notarized, and citing the recorded deed on file at the Sarasota County Clerk's office. 3 days later, her response came stapled to my mailbox in a violet HOA envelope. $750. community appearance violation. The infraction cited was a hedge of silver buttonwood that had sat 3 inches above the CC&R height limit since the house was built. Since before Linda had ever set foot in Florida. I sat in my truck that morning reading the notice twice, the cab already hot at 9 a.m. The paper smelled like cheap perfume, the same drugstore cloud Linda trailed everywhere. Pete Hollister rolled up in his golf cart before I could even walk inside. Pete was 71, retired charter boat captain, 1 bad knee, 1 good rum habit, and a 6th sense for neighborhood drama sharper than most people's eyesight. "She's running Airbnbs," Pete said, before good morning, before anything. "Her LLC. I've seen the paperwork at the marina where my son docks. Caldwell Coastal Hospitality, 11 properties." I looked up at him over the notice. 11? Your pool's listed in every one of them as a private resort amenity. She's charging $150 a day per family for access. Brother, she's been selling your water for 2 summers. That was the first moment I understood the scale. Not pettiness, operation. Pete drove me straight to the Sarasota County Clerk's office. They keep old subdivision plats on microfilm in a back room that smells like stale bread and toner. The clerk, a woman named Ellie, who had worked there longer than most marriages last, pulled the 1998 Heron Bay Estates filing and threaded it into the machine. The plat map scrolled across the screen in pale green lines. I traced the lot boundaries with my finger until I found parcel 7A. The pool was inside my property line. All of it. Every travertine slab. Every inch of the memorial fountain. The HOA's Common Area Update, filed in 2004, had drawn a new line over the top of my parcel without a boundary survey, without a signature from the original lot owner, meaning without my predecessor's consent. On paper, the common area claim was about as valid as a crayon drawing. Ellie printed me 3 copies and said softly, "Honey, you've been paying common area assessments on that pool for how long?" 10 years. They owe you back every cent. On the drive home, Pete cracked open a tall boy in the passenger seat, because Pete's rules about drinking in cars had expired sometime during the Clinton administration. I didn't say much. My brain was already sorting paperwork into categories: deed, plat, CC&R, LLC, commercial license, access log. Every file cabinet in my mind lit up like a control panel. That evening, I drove by the pool just to see what I had walked past for 2 summers. The gate kiosk still glowed pale blue, the LCD welcoming guests. A young couple from Michigan was reading a laminated card that said Caldwell Coastal Hospitality, welcome to your amenity. The man smiled at me. He genuinely thought he was allowed to be there. That's what bothered me most. These families weren't bad people. Linda had sold them a lie, taken their money, and handed them the key to my grief. I walked past them without a word and sat on my lanai as the thunderheads built out over the Gulf. Pete brought over sandwiches from the Cuban place on University. The bread was still warm. The steam smelled like pork and mustard, and the beginning of a plan. "Brother, you got that look," Pete said. "What look?" "Like the first time you explained to me how a hospital key card works. Like you're already 3 moves ahead." I set the sandwich down. "Pete, I installed every keypad in this neighborhood. I wrote the firmware. I still have the admin login." He stopped chewing. "Evan, you telling me what I think you're telling me? I'm telling you Linda Caldwell is selling access to a system that still belongs to me, on paper and on the server." The first drops of rain hit the screen. Pete set his sandwich down too. Somewhere across the neighborhood, a Bluetooth speaker kicked on in my backyard, playing a song I didn't know. Linda Caldwell had just billed me $750 for a hedge. In return, I was about to introduce her to 30 years of my profession, layer by layer, in ways she could not even imagine. The next Saturday, Linda printed up VIP guest pool passes on her home laminator. I know because Nora Kensington, the HOA treasurer, walked one over to me at the mailboxes and said quietly, "She's handing these out like Halloween candy, Evan. I don't know what to do." Nora was 48, a single mom, 2 jobs, the kind of woman who wore her tiredness like a uniform. She slipped the lanyard into my hand and walked off before anyone could see us talking. The pass was cheap, glossy, printed crooked. Caldwell Coastal Hospitality, Heron Bay VIP, amenity, valid 7 days, no refunds. On the back, in 10-point font, a disclaimer that made me laugh out loud when I read it. Amenity access subject to HOA board discretion. Linda had written herself into my property rights with a laminating machine she probably bought at Office Depot. By Saturday night, my cul-de-sac had turned into an airport parking lot. 7 rental SUVs lined my driveway and the grass beyond. A woman backed a Chevy Tahoe into my mailbox hard enough to knock it 10 degrees off plumb, then drove off without leaving a note. A man from Cleveland set up a cornhole board on my front lawn. 2 kids chased each other across my flower bed. I stood at the window watching them with the old feeling, the helpless one, rising like tide water around my ankles. Then I got to work. I spent the weekend building what I called the shadow file, screenshots of all 11 Airbnb listings owned by Caldwell Coastal Hospitality LLC. Every one of them advertised exclusive resort-style pool access with private gate code. Every listing used a photograph of my memorial fountain as the anchor image, bronze sea turtle, my wife's initials, pixelated but visible. 43 reviews between them, many mentioning the beautiful sea turtle fountain. Linda was using my wife's tombstone as a marketing asset. Warren Tanner, my attorney, met me in his office on Monday morning. Warren is the opposite of flashy. 64, corduroy jacket even in Florida summer, office smelling of old cigars and older law books. We had known each other since I handled the security install at his firm in 2011. He listened to the whole thing without interrupting, then closed his legal pad and said, "Evan, if the plat says what you say it says, we don't need to argue. We document, we strike, and we let her own words hang her. Gather everything. Don't skip a screenshot." On Sunday afternoon, a 20-something renter decided to climb my rear fence to take a shortcut from his Airbnb to my pool. He shattered the motion sensor floodlight I'd installed over the gate. I found the broken lens on the flagstone path the next morning and called the non-emergency line. A sheriff deputy came out, took photos, asked if I wanted to press charges for property damage. Linda showed up while he was still writing. She barked something about neighborhood shrinkage being normal and no need to escalate this into a legal matter, deputy. The deputy looked at her for a long, quiet second. Then he looked at me. "Sir, this is your property, your call." I told him to file the report. He did. That was one more document in the shadow file. Haley called me that night, my daughter. She was 32, 5 months pregnant, living in Tampa. I could hear her voice shaking through the phone. "Dad, Mom would have set this woman on fire by now. Your mother preferred paperwork, sweetheart. I want to come down. I want to be there. Haley, stay home. Rest for the baby. I've got it handled. I've got it handled the way your mother would have." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Okay, Dad, just tell me when it's time." I hung up and walked to the lanai. It was raining, softly, the kind of warm Gulf rain that smells like electricity and magnolias. I opened my laptop and logged into the Heron Bay Access Control Server for the first time in 9 years. The dashboard loaded exactly like I'd left it. 6 gate nodes, 42 keypads, 1 admin account. Still mine, still green, still waiting. I didn't do anything that night. I just looked at the screen for a long time. And I thought about how a woman who had never understood the difference between a password and a property line was about to learn both in the same afternoon. On the Wednesday after Labor Day, Linda Caldwell threw what she called the Sunset Pool Mixer. She emailed all 11 Airbnb hosts, posted a flyer on the community kiosk, and sent Travis Shelton door-to-door with printed invites. The flyer read, "Exclusive VIP amenity evening, live DJ, frozen cocktails, sunset networking." The small print said the mixer was complimentary for Caldwell Coastal Hospitality guests. 41 people showed up. Half of them had never seen a homeowner's pool before. I watched it from my kitchen window with the lights off. Pete sat beside me nursing a Diet Coke. He'd quit beer 2 days earlier because, as he put it, "Brother, when a war starts, the captain stays sharp." We ate leftover arroz con pollo out of a single takeout container. Outside, a Bluetooth speaker the size of a beer cooler played the kind of tropical house music that sounds like somebody trapped a dolphin in a synthesizer. At 8:47 p.m., a man in swim trunks who had been doing cannonballs for an hour climbed onto the lip of the memorial fountain. He balanced there like a diver on a board, yelled something I couldn't hear over the music, and launched himself backward. His heels came down on the bronze shell. I heard the crack all the way across the yard. It sounded like a rifle shot muffled underwater. The sea turtle snapped off at the base. Pete stood up. I did too. We walked out onto the lanai together without speaking. In the blue underwater pool lights, I could see the bronze shape slowly sinking toward the deep end, dragging the initial plate behind it like a broken wing. The fountain still pumped water, but now the water shot straight up out of the severed base, a useless geyser. Linda saw me coming across the lawn. She raised a plastic wine glass and called out, "Evan, come grab a margarita." I stopped 6 feet from her. "Linda, that fountain is a memorial. For my wife. Somebody just broke it." Her face did something complicated. Irritation flickered through the fake cheer for half a second. Then she recovered, tossed her hair, and said, "Evan, sweetie, these things happen at community events. It was an unauthorized decoration anyway. I'd warned you about modifications to common amenities." "Warned me about what?" "We can talk about this at the next board meeting, honey. You're embarrassing yourself in front of guests." That's when I walked away. Because if I'd stayed, I would have done something my wife would not have approved of. Pete followed me. We didn't speak until we were back inside my kitchen. I sat at the table with my hands flat against the wood, breathing the way you breathe when you're trying not to cry in front of another man. "Brother," Pete said, "you've been patient real long. But patience got a job, and patience job is done. Pete, I want that fountain back. We'll get it back. Every piece." The next morning at 5:30 a.m., I waded into the pool in my swim trunks. The water was still clouded from the night before. Beer, chlorine, whatever people drop in pools when they think nobody's going to have to clean it up. I found the bronze sea turtle at the bottom of the deep end. I lifted it in both hands and carried it up the steps. It weighed 31 pounds. The initial plate was bent, but intact. MBB, still legible. Still hers. I sat on the travertine for a long time. The sun came up pale orange over the gulf. A great blue heron landed on the far side of the fountain, folded its wings, and stared at me for a while. Then it flew off. I wrapped the fragment in a beach towel that used to be Mary Ann's, walked inside, and set it on the workbench in my garage. I stood there in wet trunks looking at the bench where I'd built the fountain in the first place, where I'd used a soldering iron to press her initials into the bronze, one letter at a time, while the radio played a Willie Nelson song I'd forgotten the name of. Then I dried off, put on dry clothes, sat down at my laptop, and opened a new folder called Procedural. Linda had just given me the one thing I needed most, a line that had been crossed visibly, provably, and in front of 40 witnesses, at a commercial event she had organized, at a pool she did not own. The emotional dam broke. What came through it wasn't anger. It was architecture. Warren Tanner called me 3 days later. He'd put his best paralegal on the Platt records. She had found something nobody in the neighborhood had ever bothered to look at. When the original developer, Coastal Capital Estates, filed the 1998 subdivision map, they had platted the pool parcel, Lot 7A, as a private recreational easement appurtenant to my home lot, meaning the pool had been specifically deeded to the owner of my house, not the HOA, not the common area, the owner of my house. The 2004 update that folded the pool into the HOA's common area was signed only by the HOA board and filed without the required boundary survey. No owner's signature, no county surveyor's seal. It was administratively invalid under Florida recording law, which meant the HOA had been collecting assessments on a pool it had never legally owned for 22 years. "Evan," Warren said on the speakerphone, "they built a pool for you and then spent 2 decades pretending it wasn't yours." What else did she find? "Your predecessor on the deed, the original owner, died in 2012, and the estate executor transferred the lot to you in 2014 with the easement still recorded. It ran with the land. You already owned the pool the day you closed. You just didn't know it." I sat down on the edge of my couch. Mary Ann would have loved that sentence. She'd have laughed until she cried. You already owned it. You just didn't know. That was Friday. Saturday night, Pete brought Nora Kensington to the Waffle House on Tamiami Trail. The rain was coming down hard enough to rattle the metal roof. Nora slid into the booth across from me, tired, nervous, 2 manila envelopes in her lap. She'd been a single mom since 2016, and she was terrified of losing her day job as a payroll assistant at a landscape company. Linda's husband Gregory had veto power over that company's county permits. Everybody in Heron Bay knew it. "I'm going to lose my job if she finds out I'm talking to you," Nora said. "Nora, if this goes the way I think it's going, she's not going to have a job of her own." She handed me the first envelope. 2 years of deposit slips from the HOA's checking account. Then she handed me the second one. 2 years of deposit slips from Caldwell Coastal Hospitality, LLC. The second one included $87,400 in amenity access fees, collected from Airbnb guests across 2 summers. Not a penny of it had ever touched the HOA's books. She told the board she was consolidating administrative expenses, Nora said. Treasurer signs everything, but I never had access to the LLC account. That was just Linda's. Any of this paper trail cross state lines? Every Airbnb platform that sent her a 1099 is out of state. Yes. Wire fraud. Federal. The third thing came by accident. Pete Hollister's cousin worked at the county permits office. Gregory Caldwell had fast-tracked variance approvals for 3 R1 zoned properties in Heron Bay, so they could legally operate as short-term rentals. 2 of those properties were owned by Caldwell Coastal Hospitality, LLC. Gregory's own signature was on 2 of the 3 approvals. Conflict of interest. Plain as the shrimp po' boy in front of me. I drove home at midnight in the rain. I did not turn on the radio. I parked in the garage, got out, stared at the bronze fragment on my workbench for a minute, and then said out loud, "Mary Ann, we've got them." The next morning I poured coffee and spoke into my phone's voice recorder. Property, permits, paperwork. 3 locks, 1 key, and I'm the one who installed them. Over the next 3 weeks, I built what Warren Tanner would later call the cleanest civil action he had ever filed. We worked in 4 parallel lanes. Lane 1 was the legal lane. Warren drafted a quiet title action in Sarasota County Circuit Court to formally declare Parcel 7A my sole property and invalidate the 2004 Common Area Update. Alongside it, he filed a declaratory judgment demanding the HOA refund 22 years of wrongful assessments, plus damages for commercial use without consent. Florida quiet title actions have a 20-day answer window. We timed the filing to a Friday, so Linda's 20 days included 2 weekends and the holiday week. She'd lose 8 business days before she even understood she was in court. Lane 2 was regulatory. I filed 3 complaints in a single week. The Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation received a formal complaint that Caldwell Coastal Hospitality, LLC had operated an unlicensed commercial pool for 22 months. The Florida Department of Health received a complaint about the Sunset Pool Mixer serving food and beverages without a permit. The IRS received a Form 3949-A with Nora's deposit records attached, flagging $87,000 in unreported rental income. Lane 3 was civic. I called Mallory Pierce at WFLA Channel 8. Mallory ran the investigative desk and once helped a friend of mine expose a fake disabled parking permit racket. I walked her through the paper trail in her office, with Pete sitting next to me drinking a Cuban espresso. Mallory looked up from the bank records and said, "Evan, I want this story. Give me a window." July 4th weekend, 10 a.m. You'll know when. Why that weekend? Because that's when Linda Caldwell thinks she owns this neighborhood the most. Mallory smiled slowly. Okay, I'll have a van 2 streets over that morning. Lane 4 was the one that was mine alone. The technical lane. The server. On a Sunday afternoon, I drove to Tampa, bought a fresh laptop with cash, and spent 6 hours rebuilding the admin environment for the Heron Bay access control system on a machine Linda could never trace back to me. Then I wrote a scheduled task. 10 a.m. Eastern Time, July 4th. 1 command. All 6 gate latches would engage. All distributed pool access codes would expire simultaneously. The LCD at the main gate, the pool kiosk, and the 2 side gates would light up red with a 64-character message citing the circuit court filing number and Florida Statute 810.09 for criminal trespass on private real property. Every attempted keypad entry would be time-stamped and logged to an off-site server. I tested it 3 times on the staging environment. It worked clean. I armed it. Green light. T-17 days. Pete, Nora, Warren, and Joanne Pettigrew came over that Saturday night. Joanne was 67, a retired reference librarian who had lived in Heron Bay since 2003 and documented everything in spiral notebooks because that was how she thought. She brought 3 of them. We sat around my kitchen table with a pitcher of sweet tea and a Publix cheese platter. Warren raised the one concern he had. Evan, if this lands wrong on Independence Day, you're the villain locking families out of a pool on a federal holiday. That's the visual. Warren, the families don't know the pool isn't theirs. Linda sold them the lie. She'll be the one standing on the wrong side of the gate. The camera will show that clearly. What about the 3 or 4 full-time residents who've been swimming politely for years? Joanne tapped her notebook. I've got a list, 11 families. Every one of them signed a resident agreement with you by the end of this week. Permanent access, same as always. Free, same as always. They just won't know it was ever in doubt. Nora looked up with tears in her eyes. Evan, I want to keep my job. Nora, after July 4th, you're going to be in a job you choose, not one Gregory Caldwell controls. We went through the plan one more time, top to bottom. I locked the front door behind them at 11 p.m. Then I walked out to the lanai and stood in the warm, dark. The cicadas were grinding like a machine starting up. Somewhere across the neighborhood, a Bluetooth speaker was playing a country song. A Ring camera somewhere was beeping. A teenager laughed. A whole life kept going around me, busy and unaware. And above it all, the calendar on my wall had one red circle on it. July 4th. 17 days. Linda Caldwell started getting nervous the second week in June. Not because she suspected the plan, she couldn't have, but because animals sense weather. She filed a fresh HOA notice against me, claiming the remaining fragments of the memorial fountain constituted a mosquito breeding hazard under Florida health guidelines. The notice demanded removal within 10 days or a $1,000 fine. Travis Shelton delivered it personally, sweating through his polo shirt. I thanked him and put it in the shadow file. 2 days later, Travis walked the cul-de-sac with a petition to recall Parcel 7A from Heron Bay Estates community privileges. It was legally meaningless. You can't evict a property from an HOA, but he collected 9 signatures, which told me who my enemies on the block were. That was useful. 3 days after that, my daughter Haley called me. Somebody had sent her an anonymous email from a Proton address, claiming I had been acting erratically since your mother's passing, and that concerned neighbors were worried about his mental state. There were screenshots of my property attached. The photographer had stood in my side yard to take them, meaning on my property. Haley read me the email in full, then said, "Dad, she's trying to scare me into thinking you're not okay. How are you feeling, baby?" Furious, on your behalf. And the baby just kicked, so make of that what you will. I love you, Haley. Rest up. Dad, I'm driving down on July 3rd. I'm going to be in that kitchen when the gates lock. You can't stop me. I didn't try. Some parts of my life were always going to be hers, too. Gregory Caldwell came to my front door on the evening of June 24th. Pearl polo shirt, khaki shorts, boat shoes, hands in his pockets. He didn't knock. He rang the bell twice in quick succession, like a man who expected a butler. When I opened the door, he smiled the kind of smile country club husbands use on greenskeepers. Evan, got a minute? Got a few, Gregory. Listen, this can stop tonight. Linda and I have talked it over. We'll buy the parcel from you above market. You move somewhere quieter. Everybody walks away. Gregory, I've known men like you my whole career. I designed the lock on your own mother's memory care unit in the Comus, by the way. Don't tell me what I am. His jaw set. Evan, you do not want to fight me on this. I don't. I want to fight your wife. On the record. He stared at me for a full second longer than he meant to. Then he turned and walked back across the lawn. The next morning, every member of the Sarasota County Planning Commission received a confidential ethics complaint packet from Warren Tanner's office. 3 filings, 2 signatures, 1 conflict of interest pattern that would end Gregory's career quietly, on his own schedule, in the polite way that kind of end happens. On July 1st, Linda hosted a pre-4th Welcome Week kickoff party on her front lawn, and spray-painted orange temporary parking lines across the asphalt directly in front of my driveway. Someone stenciled the word amenity on each line in 6-inch letters. That night, somebody slashed 2 tires on Nora Kensington's Corolla. Nora called me at 7 the next morning, crying but steady. "I'm not backing out," she said. "I just wanted you to know." Pete and I drove to the Walmart on Bee Ridge at 7 a.m. and bought her 4 new tires. We installed them in her driveway by 10. Nora stood on her porch drinking coffee and watching us with the complicated look of a woman who was finally going to be visible after 20 years of trying not to be. Mallory Pierce called that afternoon. "My van will be 1 street over, parked on Mangrove Lane, at 9:45 a.m. on Independence Day. Deputy Landry's been notified by Warren's firm. DBPR Inspector Harlan Estes has scheduled a 10:15 a.m. unannounced visit. IRS certified mail is routed to arrive at the Caldwell residence at approximately 10 a.m. Everybody synchronized? Evan, this is the cleanest story I've worked in 3 years. Go to bed, wake up early, pour coffee. On the evening of July 3rd, Haley arrived from Tampa. She hugged me at the door and held on longer than usual. Pete brought over takeout from the Columbia restaurant. We sat around the table, 3 of us, and ate Cuban sandwiches and flan like this was any other summer. I didn't explain the plan in detail. Haley knew the shape of it. She knew her father. At 9 p.m., I walked out to the workbench in the garage and unwrapped the bronze sea turtle from Marianne's beach towel. I had been rebuilding it quietly for weeks. The new base was poured solid, the plate with her initials reattached with lead-free solder. It wasn't identical to the original. It was better, heavier, harder to break. I set it in the center of the lanai table, where the fountain had originally stood. I placed a single candle beside it. I lit the candle, and I spoke to my wife. Tomorrow, love. We finish it tomorrow. The candle burned for 9 hours. The cicadas came up loud right before dawn, the way they do in Florida in July, like somebody flipped a switch. At 5:45 a.m., the sun rose pink over the Gulf. At 7 a.m., I poured my first cup of coffee. At 8 a.m., I ran one last system check on the gate network. All 6 nodes green, scheduled task armed. At 9 a.m., Haley sat down at the kitchen counter with her own coffee and laid her hand on her belly. Pete walked through the front door with 2 bear claws from the bakery and set them on the counter without a word. 9:45 a.m., all 3 of us in my kitchen, laptop open, dashboard glowing. At 9:50 a.m., Linda Caldwell stepped out onto the main pool deck in a white linen caftan, holding a clipboard and a megaphone, looking like a cruise director. 42 people were already inside the pool area. Another 30 were walking toward the main gate with towels over their shoulders and kids on their hips. Travis Shelton was greeting them at the entrance with a laminated tote bag in his hand. At 9:58 a.m., Mallory Pierce's van pulled onto Mangrove Lane. I watched its roof antenna rise on my Ring camera. At 9:59 a.m., I moved my cursor over the ARM button on the dashboard. It was already armed. I clicked verify one last time. Green. At 10 a.m., all 6 solenoids in the Heron Bay access control system engaged at the same instant. The sound traveled across the neighborhood like somebody had slammed a refrigerator door in every house at once. A deep, metallic clunk. The LCD at the main gate, the pool kiosk, and both side gates lit up red. The message read, "Notice. This parcel is the private real estate of Evan Brooks, parcel ID 7-A, Sarasota County. All prior access codes have been rescinded per Circuit Court Filing 2024-CA-4719. Unauthorized entry will be prosecuted under Florida Statute 810.09 for criminal trespass." The pool gate rattled. A man inside tried to push it open. It didn't move. Linda Caldwell walked up to the keypad with her clipboard still under one arm and punched in her personal code. The screen flashed red. Access denied. Admin privileges revoked. She punched it in again. Same result. She punched it a 3rd time. The screen locked her out and posted her own name in red. User Linda Caldwell. Privileges revoked. 10 o'clock 12 EDT. 40 feet away, the crowd outside the gate started to realize something was wrong. A father with 2 kids in Florida Gators swim trunks turned to Travis Shelton. "Bro, what's happening with the gate?" Travis did not know what was happening with the gate. Travis's face, in real time, became the face of a man watching his mortgage disappear. At 10:03 a.m., Mallory Pierce's van rolled up to the main gate. She stepped out with a cameraman, 1 step behind her. Her voice carried. "Excuse me, we received a tip about short-term rental fraud at this community. Can you confirm who you are and what your LLC has been charging for pool access?" Linda spun around. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. At 10:07 a.m., Deputy Ellery Landry's cruiser pulled in behind the news van. He got out, thumbs in his duty belt. "Ma'am, we've received multiple reports of unauthorized commercial activity on private property. I'm going to ask you to step away from the gate, please." "Deputy, this is my community. This is..." "Ma'am, step away from the gate." At 10:12 a.m., a second state vehicle turned in. Harlan Estes, from the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation, badge clipped to his shirt, clipboard in hand. Ms. Caldwell, I'm Harlan Estes with DBPR. I'm here to issue an immediate cease and desist and seize the commercial activity records of Caldwell Coastal Hospitality, LLC. Can you confirm you have been collecting amenity fees for the pool at Parcel 7A? At 10:15 a.m., a UPS truck rolled up to 1824 Heron Way, Linda's own address, 3 blocks over, and dropped off a certified IRS envelope. Her teenage daughter, live streaming the mess on TikTok from the front sidewalk, accepted the envelope on camera and read the return address out loud. Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. 60,000 people heard it in real time. The dominoes fell inside 45 minutes. Linda grabbed the pool gate handle and shook it with both hands. A middle-aged couple from Dayton stepped up behind her. "Ma'am, we paid you $700 for week-long pool access. We've got our receipt right here. You tell us what's going on." "It's a misunderstanding, ma'am." The father stepped around her and pointed at the LCD on the kiosk. "That screen says this pool is privately owned by a man named Evan Brooks. And it says you've been arrested for fraud. Are you Linda Caldwell?" Linda's mouth went dry. She turned to the camera instead of answering. The camera kept rolling. From my kitchen, I watched 42 renters come to a single collective realization. They had been scammed. They had each paid between $150 and $700 for an exclusive amenity that had never been Linda's to sell. They rotated away from the pool gate and turned to her, all of them at once, the way a school of fish turns. Phones came up. Flash photography. An older woman in a Tennessee Volunteers cover-up shouted, "I want my refund, ma'am, and I want it today." Deputy Landry read Linda her rights at 10:31 a.m. Grand theft in the first degree, wire fraud, operating an unlicensed commercial establishment, unauthorized use of a neighborhood access control system. She cried exactly once, a single, soundless gasp when the cuffs clicked. Then she went quiet, her eyes locked on the asphalt. Harlan Estes handed Travis Shelton an envelope full of official stop work orders. Travis walked away from the gate with the envelope in his hand and did not look back. I stood up from my kitchen counter. I put my coffee mug in the sink. Haley held my hand for a second. Pete nodded once, slowly. Then I walked out my front door and across the street. The crowd parted for me. People were on their phones, still live streaming. The pool gate was still red LCD'd and locked tight. I stepped up to the keypad, typed my admin PIN, and swiped my card. The gate chirped green. Joanne Pettigrew's 2 grandkids, 6 and 8, stood behind me with their little Spider-Man goggles on. I knelt down and handed them a fresh resident access card I'd programmed that morning. It had their names on it. Kaylee and Levi Pettigrew, Heron Bay resident access, 24/7, seasonal. Y'all are good, swim all day. Kaylee's mother was already crying, quietly, off to the side. Joanne nodded at me once. Reference librarian to retired engineer. The nod of 2 people who understood documentation as a moral act. The kids ran past me, sliding across the deck in their pool shoes, and dove in. Everybody watched. Even Linda Caldwell, from the back of Deputy Landry's cruiser, where she had finally stopped speaking. The cruiser door closed. And then there was just the sound of 2 children laughing in the pool my wife had loved more than any other place on earth. The quiet title action was granted 23 days later. Judge Sutton Ashford took one look at the 1998 plat, the 2004 filing with no survey, and the 22 years of wrongful assessments, and ruled from the bench. Parcel 7A, pool included, memorial fountain included, was confirmed in perpetuity to Evan Brooks, heirs and assigns. The HOA was ordered to refund 10 years of common area assessments to me, with interest. Warren Tanner cashed the settlement check in my name, and I put every cent of it in a new account I named the Mary Ann Brooks Aquatic Foundation. The HOA dissolved at a special election in September. Joanne Pettigrew was elected the new board president, reluctantly, after telling the assembled neighbors she would accept only if the board minutes were posted publicly within 48 hours of every meeting. They voted yes unanimously, including 3 of the 9 petition signers, who by then had taken their names off that petition in writing. Linda Caldwell pleaded out in November, 3 to 5 years at Lowell Correctional in Ocala, restitution to 47 renters, permanent bar from any fiduciary role in any Florida HOA. Her bookkeeper Brenna Whitworth flipped immediately and gave the state attorney 4 additional counts. Gregory Caldwell resigned from the Planning Commission under an ethics agreement before a formal hearing could be scheduled. The Pearl Lexus got repossessed the second week of September. The Caldwell house went on a short sale listing with a cheerful stock photo of the front lawn that did not quite hide the orange parking stripes Linda had painted in June. The listing sat on Zillow for 108 days. Nora Kensington got an immunity letter and a small whistleblower award from the IRS. She quit the landscaping company the morning her paycheck cleared and took a new position doing payroll at a pediatric dental office 12 miles away. Her boss's first words to her were, "Sweetie, we don't call anybody sweetie here." She laughed for the first time in 2 years. The Marianne Brooks Aquatic Foundation opened on the first Sunday of October. Every Sunday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., the pool at Parcel 7A is free and open to any child aged 4 to 14 from Northport, 18 miles east, the community where the drowning rates in this county are highest. I hired a certified Red Cross swim instructor named Addie Ballard, who teaches in English and Spanish, and who, on her first day, taught 11 children to float on their backs. 9 of them had never seen a pool before. 2 of them were afraid of water because they had uncles who had drowned. By the end of the first lesson, all 9 were floating, and one of them told Addie she wanted to grow up to be a marine biologist. The bronze fountain stands back in the center of the pool deck. New base, original initials, a heavier turtle with thicker bronze at the shell joints. There is a small brass plaque on the base that reads, "For Marianne. She loved water. She loved kids. This is the pool she would have wanted." Haley came home on the 1st of December. She brought my granddaughter, who was 7 weeks old, swaddled and sleepy. Haley had named her Marianne Pete Brooks Whitfield. Pete Hollister cried when he heard the middle name. He tried to hide it behind his sunglasses and failed badly. Haley laid the baby in my arms on the lanai, and I sat with her for an hour while the sun set pink over the Gulf. And I told my granddaughter about the woman she was named for, and the quiet voice you use for babies who are almost asleep. Linda Caldwell thought a community pool belonged to whoever had the loudest voice. She forgot that water always finds its own level, and the law, eventually, does too. If you've ever had a neighbor, a board member, or a Karen try to sell something that wasn't hers to sell, tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Some of them end up becoming the next script I write. And if you want to hear what happened when a developer tried to bulldoze a Civil War cemetery to build a walking trail, and the 84-year-old widow who buried him in his own paperwork, hit subscribe, because that one goes up next Friday. From my lanai in Heron Bay, with my granddaughter asleep on my chest, and Pete in the next chair drinking a Diet Coke, thank you for listening. See you next time.
So there it is. The woman who spent 2 summers renting out a pool she never owned, arrested on Independence Day at the very gate she thought she controlled. Linda Caldwell's advantage was confidence. Evan Brooks' advantage was that he had installed the locks himself, literally and legally, long before she ever signed her first fake amenity pass. The lesson here is simple and worth writing down. In this country, the paperwork wins the fight, not the loudest voice at the mailbox. Check your deed, pull your plat map, know what you actually own and what you actually only think it owns. Because the difference is sometimes 20 years and $87,000. Drop a comment telling me what you could have done in Evan's place. And tell me about the neighbor or the HOA board in your own life who needs a July 4th moment of their own. Is this one hit? Hit the subscribe button. Because next Friday, I'm telling you about the developer who tried to bulldoze a Civil War cemetery and the 84-year-old widow who buried him in his own paperwork.